1, 2.
Good morning, colleagues. Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. We have actually have a few more extra staff attending here, which is wonderful. I'm sorry that you missed out on yesterday, but Prof. Panos said he will just give he will ask somebody from yesterday to give a little review of what happened yesterday. Today it's going to be work. You're going to work on some practical assignments with Prof. Panos and the guys there. The online people who's also joining us online, you will also be working today, so I don't think you're going to sit and listen, you will be working also. I'm going to give over to Prof. Panos, and good luck with today, and I hope you learn a lot. So when we have another workshop like this, you will be able to present it for us. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, yeah, if you have a discussion and you have to talk, please use this mic, okay? Otherwise, the online people can't hear you.
Good morning. Welcome back to people from yesterday, and it's good to see new faces. I'm going to give you a quick overview of who I am for the new people, and I'll ask everybody in the room just to introduce themselves so we know how we are. Also, welcome to our online colleagues. I think there's 5 of them, 4 or 5. Yeah, that's great. So 3 more than yesterday, so welcome online as well. Well, my name is Panos Vlachopoulos. I'm the Associate Dean Quality and Standards in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, but I also spent 3 years in the Faculty of Health and Medicine and Health Science as an Associate in Learning and Teaching, and I'm still working in some capacity with them on a number of projects. By training, I studied philosophy, so that was my first degree, 4 years, philosophy, and I moved into education, higher education, and online. And as I said yesterday, I've been traveling a lot over the last 15 years from Scotland, where I did my PhD, Manchester, New Zealand, Hong Kong, back to the UK, and now 6 years in Australia. So my passion is learning, quality learning, teaching, working with colleagues, all to improve the experience of our learners. So I've been doing a number of projects. We've done a big project on digital health over the last 4 years at Macquarie, so I'm happy to talk to you after that about it. It involved a number of initiatives to how to digitize our curriculum. But yesterday and today, the focus will be on a methodology that is called team-based learning. It's a prescribed methodology, a copyrighted methodology, and we try to make sense of it and see how you can adapt or use this methodology in your own context. Maybe quickly, we go again, your name and your area.
I'm Yolandi, and I'm from the subgroup physiology.
Oh, sorry, yes. I need to remind people.
Hello, I'm Yolandi, and I'm from the subject group physiology.
Hi everyone, I'm Lebo. I work with Yolandi.
Hello, I'm Mari Ibang from social work.
Hello, Tbl Mabusela from psychology.
Miande Erasmus, also psychology.
Kobus Oosthuizen from Human Movement Sciences.
Ina van Niekerk from pharmacy practice.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Yolandi, and I'm with the Center for Health Professions Education.
Morning, everyone. I'm Theodora from subject group nutrition.
I'm Yulani, and I'm from CTL.
This one? Great. Oh, yeah. Sorry, guys. Yes, you go there. Yes. Sorry, guys.
So I'm Nadine Smith and helping you from CTL side.
Hi, I'm Marita Jansen van Vieren. I'm also from CTL, from the Vol Triangle campus. And this is the Boer, and he's also from our campus, and he is the person doing the live stream for us. I just want to say that you will all be able to view the live streams. It is recorded, so we will send you the links. Paula will send you the links. That's for yesterday, today, and also for tomorrow. And then you can also use those links and share it with your colleagues so that they are able to view that. It's a closed share, so it's only available for those people who do have the links. That's why you can also then share the links and then use that and use your recordings. Thank you.
And the other colleague who is busy is Tabor.
And online we have 5 people. If you today is part 2 of a series, so we have a bit of work to do in terms of hands-on. And before that, I would like to give some quick overview about TBL for the people that were not here yesterday and also for our online, and then try to make the connection with what we're going to be doing today. The focus today is on more practice on how to design for TBL. So today is a design day, and I will ask you, you'll see here a number of flip charts and a couple of sticky notes. I will ask you to work ideally as a team of 2, if you can. So people maybe they were not here yesterday, they can team up with someone they were, so they can catch up a bit with the theory. Then we're going to do a review and a debrief together to see where we are. And then we will be discussing some aspects of how we can use what we have for either face-to-face or fully online TBL. And in the afternoon, we're going to do a quick review of what actually the literature. We've done an extensive literature review over the last 3 years, and I can give you all the list so you can have all the publications if you're going to search yourselves, to see the benefits. Are there any particular benefits? Have we, now that you know more about the practice and the theory of TBL, can you see what it's all about, and does it make sense for you to introduce it as a methodology? And all these interesting questions. Now, yesterday we wrote a number of questions as a starting point for us. So what I'll do today is I'm going to grab a few of the questions to see the ones that I think we have answers, and I will ask some of our colleagues from yesterday to give us a quick overview of their answer as an introduction to TBL. Yeah, can I ensure? Or what? Great, thank you.
Need to interrupt. We've got 3 colleagues online. Ketumetu Chele, she was there yesterday as well. She's from Vol Campus Social Work. Then Jan Paul from also CTL is also monitoring for us from the Vol campus. And then also Ruth Shipping from Mafeking campus in nursing school.
Participants, you might not have physically flip charts and sticky notes, but I will ask you to use the chat area or whatever is available into the live stream in order to engage. It will be good to get your feedback so you can feel engaged in the process. So, I will start with the easy question that was phrased, which was, what exactly is TBL? That was how it was phrased to me. So, who can tell us what exactly is TBL? Oh, okay, I removed the exactly. What is TBL? And we can take the microphone so other people will do it.
I have the definition as it's supposed to be, but what I've learned yesterday is TBL is all about working in a team and having students work in a team and learn from each other. But the important thing that I learned is it's not just any group work. It's a very specific structure and pattern of activities of how you're supposed to do it, and you're supposed to do all of it in that sequence. Otherwise, it's not TBL. Otherwise, you can call it something else, but that's, yeah, TBL is all about that.
Thank you. And also, the follow-up question you already kind of asked, how is it different from group work? That was kind of a follow-up.
What I've learned also about TBL, it works best in modules where you want students to apply the knowledge that they've gained. Yes. So you have to, yeah, because the final phase of TBL is the application exercises and tasks. So that means that needs to be a quite difficult and or task that requires application.
Great.
Different from group work is that the whole approach has got first the individual readiness that you need to test, and then so you first do your readings on your own and your individual readiness, and then you get into a setup where there will be a group of members between 5 to 7 members, and you will negotiate the answers that you got in the individual readiness test, and then you will write the same test again as a team. And you need to negotiate for the correct answers, and then you also go out and you do an individual application task again. So that's how it's different.
Great. So, the big thing here, and I repeat it, we're talking about a copyrighted methodology. So if you apply it, and if you follow it, and in particular, if you want to research and report on it, that's perhaps it becomes more meaningful. Either you do the sequence of the TBL the way it's been prescribed as a methodology, and then you can make an assumption or a judgment whether it works or not for you. Or if you do just parts of it, and I will show you examples of people just using elements, still you feel free to get what you want out of it, but when you go back to report, I wouldn't call it a TBL methodology. You can call it a case-based methodology, PBL, group work, which is the easiest one, okay? It is one of these things. It is someone came with the idea, as we know, in the 1970s. Then there's an organization, the TBL organization, with a website that they have their own materials, they run their own conferences. So my feeling is that everybody's welcome to join, but it is this kind of methodology that either you do or you don't do. It's important to separate that from the beginning, because I've seen variations of that. And the same when you read about TBL, you might come across papers or books that they talked about team-based learning. Normally it won't be capitalized like the prescribed, because obviously we use the term team-based learning anyway. And check before you make your own assumptions or you make judgments whether they're referring to a TBL methodology. So TBL has a sequence, and the sequence is individual. So the big thing is that there is, at the beginning, a phase where they have to study. Yeah, they study resources and materials that you put them. Normally, in an online space or in an envelope, whatever you do, but they have to do preparation. Important. And the students, they need to understand that. If they don't do the preparation, there is no way they can contribute to a TBL, and they will feel that they are not actually part of the group. And that becomes obvious in the very first couple of weeks, whether they're buying in or not. Then we have the IRAT. IRAT is the individual or the independent readiness assessment test. Practically, it's a quiz. Yeah, a series of questions. They are designed for an individual test that always happens at the beginning of each class. So if you do a TBL, the very first thing you do in the class after you say welcome and what you do, you're going to be having a time allocated to do the IRAT. And then we have the TRAT, which is a team-based assessment test, which is identical. Exactly the same questions, but this time they need to talk to a group and reply to the same question, but as a group. So that will mean that, for example, if the three of us who have different views about what is the correct answer, we have to negotiate. I need to be influenced by you, and then we can agree what is the right question, and we report back as a team. Yep, and we'll come back to the teams. After that, what do we have? Yeah, so, good. There is a process in the TBL as part of the copyright methodology that is called the appeals process. Feel free to use it if you want. This is one of the processes that sometimes people, they omit them or they have them there, but they don't really take it seriously. It is a process where anyone in the group could appeal either a question, the way it's been phrased, or an answer. My view is that if you are going to use appeals, you have to write questions that potentially can lead to some sort of an appeal, like a bit more ambiguous questions that they can take some different interpretations. Yeah. Otherwise, if it is straightforward always, there won't be a lot of appeals. So it's a process that is between, and then we have the clarification session. The clarification session is where you come together as a big team. Important thing for you, you are the facilitator of this clarification session. It's not opportunity for you just to go then and play your slides and you clarify everything. Normally, you clarify things that they are evident from the TBA, from the IRAT and the TRAT, that there is no answer or correct answer, and give priority to teams clarifying for other teams. So if you were one team and there's another team, and we question, for example, is TBL a prescribed methodology? And you have different views, before I step in as a lecturer and give you some evidence about the correct answer, I would like, first of all, to hear the clarification between the two of you. So we spend, and that's important thing, substantial amount of time in team discussion and team negotiation. That's why it's TBL. Yeah? It's one of the most important things. You need to plan, you need to allow time for the team discussion. And after that clarification, we have, what is the last process? The focused application, the FAT, focused application task. And again, this task should be something that brings together the whole of the TBL process. So all the questions that you've done and all the discussions actually contribute to that task. It's not something that is not relevant to the questionnaires and the quizzes and all the information you've done. It's a very important thing. And then becomes a question, as we said yesterday, whether you do it in a sequence, meaning that you do it 1 hour, you do the readiness part, and 1 hour or whatever you have, you do the other, or you break it and you do one online for one part and face-to-face for the other. And we had a very interesting discussion yesterday about different ways. So the two most common ways will be that if you have 2 hours, and I know some universities might not have this kind of block time as one event, but if you have 2 hours, you can run a complete TBL within the 2 hours period. Yeah, 10 to 11 readiness with the discussions and the clarifications, and 11 to 12 an application. Or morning and afternoon, or morning of one day, and then the following day you might have a tutorial. Most of us, we don't have a sequence of 2 hours, so it's good for you to decide what you're going to spend time in the class. will you spend time for readiness, doing all this discussion of the team, and then in the application you might want to do it in an online, for example, an online discussion or another thing, or vice versa. And I think yesterday we kind of thought both of them could work, but don't start to blend them together. Like don't do a bit of the IRAT here and then the application, and then you do the TRAT in the online space, because that also could be a difficulty. So it's 2 phases, readiness, application, and you decide how to plug it in. Make sense? Any questions so far? With a microphone?
I just want to get clarity about the clarification session. It feels like the appeal and the clarification session will kind of blend often into each other, or in your experience it's different, because the appeal will be about something that is not clear or something that is different from what you think. So do you also use the information from the appeal session to clarify, so it kind of it becomes one big session, or do you say, okay, we're done with the appealing, now clarify, and then there are questions, or how does it exactly work?
You can actually, I've seen it both ways. So if you run on a schedule, normally I will have the appeals as immediately after the TRAT. And I will just say, now for 5 minutes, I want to know whether there is any confusion in terms of the way that the questions are phrased. So keep in mind that the appeal is not about your interpretation of the question, is whether you believe that the question is not phrased well, or you didn't see the answer as part of the set of the answers that you expected, and you appeal that. A common appeal will be, for example, in your question you said what should be the sequence of a TBL. I think, given that it's a copyrighted, the should is not a question, it's always about what must be the process. So things like that, the students will pick it up and they will say, well, if it is must, it's that 5 things. But if it is what should, in our case, it could be the other sequence. So we're talking about that level. The clarification will be about you having, knowing what's happening in the class from the TRATs and the IRATs, where the confusion is about concepts, and you will open it up to clarify a whole concept or a whole idea. But it can naturally, you can start with an appeal, and the appeal could result in a clarification. And it's natural, and I wouldn't stop it if it happens. That's how it goes. Does it answer the question? Yeah, that's the thing. Okay. Can we use TBL in a class of 1,600 students? Okay, anyone who is willing to tell us what they think from yesterday? Online people can write questions as well, and we will take them as they come.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you can use TBL in a class, in a large class. You just need to be creative about it, I think, and make sure that you engage the class.
Great. So the answer actually is straightforward, yes. Technology itself in the 1970s, 77, whatever it was introduced because of the increase of student numbers in business schools in the US. So it is a way to do a team learning approach with a large class. Now, the creative aspect is important because the physical space in which you operate is going to make a difference. The biggest difficulty that we have to visualize until we run it is how on earth on a theater that people are sitting in front of different rows, and you can barely see them on the back, how they will end up doing TRATs. The IRAT, it's easy most of the time, yeah? Especially if you use an electronic device. Go online, do the quiz, and done. What's happening with the TRATs? And that's very important. What do we know about groups in the TBL? What about the groups? Permanent. It's absolutely important that when you form a group for a TBL, a team for a TBL, the team is permanent for the duration of the TBL across the module, as you call it, yeah? Across the module. Which means that even in a theater, the people that they are in the team, they will gather together, they know they will be in the 7th row over there. And the idea is that they turn to each other and can actually create the teams of, what is an ideal number? 5 to 7, according to the literature. I will say you can go a bit higher if you have 1,600, you may want to do. But 5 to 7 means that if we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, anything like that, and we can turn to each other, we can have a quick conversation in order to report back. Other designs of TBL in a big theater will be in the same way that I put here my notes, but that means preparation. You have to go in the theater in advance, and you can put a number of visuals. So the teams actually, they move, they go out, and they form mini groups as they go around the wall. I've seen it. It's a messy enterprise, meaning that to do that and then bring them back, it will take 10 minutes to 15 minutes. So you really need to pencil in the time, how long does it take for a group to be formed. So normally I would not ask them to move out of the space to do something. I might do it for the clarification, for the application session, depending how I'm going to run it. But in that room, with 1,600 or whatever, if you have to do it with all of them in the room, just ask them to form the team exactly where they are. Yeah? And the reason we do 5 to 7 or more is because not always they're going to be there, all of them. So if we had a team of 3, a lot of the times it will end up being a pair. If you had a team of 20, again, there won't be any possibility to have conversation. So it's a bit about the logistics. But that's one in the methodology that you can play with. I mean, it's not, this is the ideal based on the theory. Okay? In which context does TBL work best? We had a couple of answers already. In which context? Application. Absolutely. Application. That's the core outcome of the TBL in terms of having people to. So 2 things. It's about teams and it's about applications. If you don't have any of the 2 as part of your outcomes, you don't want to do anything to deliver, you can better do case-based learning, problem-based learning, all the other kind of methodologies. They are all valid, but TBL takes time to prepare, as you witnessed already. You better have very clear reasons for doing it. Yeah, it's a very important thing. Sorry, this microphone.
Just need to ask something in terms of the formation of the teams. In a case where you've got, for example, in my case, I've got a module, and in the class it's 2 different groups. Like I've got the dietetic students and I've got the consumer sciences. So it's 2 professions, but they're doing a similar module. So do I need to keep the dietetics alone in their teams, or can you mix them, especially when it comes to the application, because they then, their professional fields are a little bit different.
It's a good question, especially in areas where you have different professions doing what is supposedly an interprofessional study. The teams, they need to be pre-agreed. You have to find a way to formulate the teams, and they are permanent. So my view is that in TBL, you do exactly the same application for everybody. If you cannot have the same application for everybody in the team, then actually you need to run 2 TBLs, like separate them out in the class. That's important. So my answer to you is that you will blend them, because that's the part of the TBL, because everybody needs to be able to engage with the scenario you're going to give them, given that you're going to have 1 scenario. That's one of the key things of the TBL is that everybody works on the same problem and with the same specific or near specific answers. So it has to be actually truly interprofessional in order to work if you have interprofessional teams. But you based on any information you have, so gender, background, you assign them. it's going to be, you cannot really run a TBL and give them one scenario and give the other team a different scenario. The teams must have identical scenarios. Otherwise, it's not TBL. Yeah, which it's fine, but you don't need to follow this methodology. You can do something else. You can do problem-based learning. Yeah, that's the big thing. So from that point of view, I don't think there's a problem blending them because they will have to contribute to the same position. Make sense? Okay. Yes.
I'm giving the subject for management. So it's HR and it's change management in financial and the whole spectrum. And I have only 2 periods per management section. So it's very difficult for me. So I started off by giving the students, on the first place I made the mistake, they made their own groups and they were too big. So they were about 10 in a group. They had their own pharmacy, so they decide, are they going to be a mobile pharmacy or independent of part of a group? Are they in a rural area, city? So then they have the application. I give them a task. So they go through all the slides and then they do a quiz online and then they come to class and ask questions if there's problems. And then I give them an assignment. They have to say, the first one was for HR. They must decide on a profile for, say, a pharmacist assistant for their pharmacy, and then they must put out advertisement because they want to employ somebody, so they must make an advertisement to apply to their pharmacy. And then afterwards we come together, or I give them feedback after they submit it, and then they come and appeal. And then we discuss every pharmacy separately. So we didn't follow the sequence.
Again, I mean, TBL in the sense of what the methodology is supposed to be the benefits, but you used a lot of the ingredients of TBL, which is absolutely fine. So the message I want to give you is that you can use any of the things that they exist in the methodology in any kind of sequence, because that's part of our nature, but the TBL methodology has a particular reasons that they think happen in a particular order. So one thing, for example, that you don't have teams working on independent problems is in the core of the TBL. It has to be the same problem, and everybody has to address it from the same perspective. You can have a series of applications that everybody needs to engage. So if you have a dietitian and a nurse and a pharmacist in the same team, and you have one scenario, everybody needs to contribute from the perspective, but you can apply 2 or 3 different scenarios but everybody needs to engage with them. When you start breaking and say, well, you clinicians, you're going to discuss the clinical aspect of it, and you pharmacists, the pharmacy plus management plus aspect, then we are moving away from the TBL. Okay? Which is not, I'm not saying is bad, I'm just saying is not the sequence. Anything else? Anything? They're quiet. Please post questions, which is important. We had questions about how do you get students to engage. That's the big question. How do you get students to engage? The answer for this is that you need to be very clear where do you introduce the TBL methodology. We have examples where the whole of the curriculum, meaning the whole of the module, runs in a TBL sequence. Every week there's a TBL, and you can overdo it. Yeah, people, they might start feeling that is a lot of work. Some of the best examples I've seen in terms of TBL is where TBL is plugged in a particular part of the 12 weeks or 13 weeks, how many you have in your semester, in order to, like in the most difficult weeks, or the weeks that there are a lot of content and a lot of information to be consolidated. But having working a bit the assessment aspect of the TBL, and we spent yesterday a bit of time, and there is in the literature I gave you a lot about assessment. What exactly are you going to be assessing is important. If you don't assess the team aspect of the TBL at all, a lot of the students, they will say, well, if at the end of the day you're assessing an essay, and the students that can pass by coming to do an exam or an essay, it's less likely that the students are going to buy in and come into the process. But if you say that you are assessing as part of it the TBL process, a reflection about how do you work in groups, how do you influence a pharmacist, and what arguments do you bring, and you put that of your assessment, that becomes the big motivator. So the biggest mistake for us is that we do TBL, and then we bring them for an exam that is 60%. Unless you run the exam as a TBL type of exam, meaning the scenarios and this, and they know that unless they come to the TBL, they don't have the way of thinking in order to come to the exam, like the type of questions you're going to ask them and so on. Assessment drives learning. That's one of the biggest things that we learn in higher education. So we need to play the assessment card in a very, very good way. Okay, I mean, this is just, are you relatively clear about what TBL is? Yeah? All right. I'm not going to go now to give you some of the benefits, but I'm going to show you a couple of examples of, another important reminder. What type of design do we use in the TBL? Backward design. And what?
When you want a specific outcome, you say, this is the outcome that I want to do, and this is the assignment, and then what do I need for them to know before they come to the assignment, and then you make questions to make sure they know.
Okay. It's not different. Education. The thing here is that the very first thing we do is we formulate our outcomes, the learning outcomes for the session or for the unit or for the module clearly. Then, so that's the learning outcomes, the very first part we do. Then we have the application task. What do we want the task to be? How specific, how vague? The methodology will say it has to be specific enough, and if possible, have choice, that it actually is the same choice that they can all go for. And then, only then you start talking about the different tests, the quiz they're going to be designing. So learning outcomes, applications, then the tests. And then you're going to say, what content do I need to provide to the students to study, to prepare? Which goes against some of the practice in higher education, which is, this is all the 13 weeks of slides and presentations that I have prepared. How can I pack them into a 13 weeks TBL? That will become a big agony of you trying to pack all your content into TBL. If you don't need all the content, you don't need all the content. If the students can reply to the question by just reading a paper and a video, that's fine. But that's the sequence. Let's see an example. We did a couple of examples yesterday. So this is an example of a course on applied medical science. Introductory course in MD, Doctor of Medicine, real thing, runs as we speak, ran literally 2 weeks ago, live, and I will show you the unit then to see how it ran. The main outcome, so the professor, he's an endocrinologist, and he runs what he calls clinical colloquia, which used to be a case-based learning methodology, actually still has a lot of case in it. But he wanted a very structured approach for students to engage with it prior, during, and after. Very flipped approach, as we call it. So he demonstrated, he wrote those two outcomes. So on successful completion of this week's application task, students should be able to demonstrate competency in formulating relevant medical history questions about diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment of conditions for which people seek healthcare. So it is about medical history. That's part one. The focus here is on formulating the questions. So this is what he wants to teach the students, how they can formulate questions that they can use in the medical examination when they take the history. And the type of questions, where there is family questions, social questions, clinical, medical questions, and so on. The second, of course, thing that he was very interesting was that students, after they've done the TBL, they will be able to use anatomical and medical terminology to accurately describe a condition, whatever condition is in the scenario he's providing. Okay? So you can see here, relatively not low, middle level, early to middle level outcomes. So the outcomes are not necessarily they should be able to problem solve the condition and so on. He wants people to be able to know what type of questions exist in the medical history, write and potentially use, and then use accurate terminology. Yeah? Any questions on that? So that was the thing. And then we're working to see what type of application would you do. Now, if these are your two outcomes, you should have an application that at minimum asks students to do what? Formulate questions. If you give them the questions and you ask them to apply them in a scenario, this is not aligned. So he needs to, if you do that, you go to the basics. Let's start by formulating questions. So my FAT, my focus application, should be primarily around formulating, and maybe you can use them as well. And then about this, the medical. Yeah. Yeah. So you will need to provide them the opportunity to make use of the vocabulary, either in writing or in a presentation. So what he came up with was like that. Applied medical scenario, clinical colloquia, TBL. Give a scenario for a laceration presentation, 30 years old female, presents to the emergency department with this condition. Work in your teams to prepare a set of questions to obtain medical history. That's part one of the FAT. Write your questions on a flip chart. Second part of the same thing. Compare the questions with each other. Amend your medical history questions after you've done your work. Check your questions against the exemplar set questions. That goes to the expectation that a TBL scenario needs to have a specific choice. So everybody, after they finish this application, they should be using one instrument and then apply the questions to a video patient scenario. Yeah, quite straightforward. But it's broken down to a number of things. An alternative way of writing this scenario will be to be more specific. For example, it might be that you give them 2 or 3 big sets of questions, and you ask them to choose, for example, which question is not appropriately written. So choose, and then how would you amend it? How would you make it a better one? So this one goes more to the, if there is such a thing as a more open TBL scenario, that will be in the more open, but needs to have a benchmark, a specific benchmark that they can actually check. It's not that every team needs to use the same questions at the end. Okay? And that's the difference between TBL and other cases. If I was just doing problem-based, I would just ask them to come with their own questions. I wouldn't necessarily need them to check them against something that is benchmark, and they can go out and use them, and that's fine. But here, I want to go back to have a specific choice. Yeah? So it's the 4 S's of the TBL are, yeah, same problem, significant, same, specific, choice, yes. So this is another important element of the TBL. So here he tries as much as he can to make it specific by adding this element of comparison with the benchmark. So the students, what they do is they use the flip chart. So here is the outcome of one team in the FAT. This is the outcome of the other team in the FAT. So the first team, it has the physical examination, medical allergies, social history. They are not really phrased as questions. Yeah, so illegal drugs, alcohol, is that how you're going to go? Like there's going to be a patient who can say, any illegal drugs? No, you're going to do that. But that's how they formulate it. I gave you one of the examples that it was the worst formulated. And then you have an example that had very clear things. Could you describe how when you were injured? Can you describe the pain? What were you using the knife? They went into a lot of details. There was around 13 variations of questions that they've done in the group. Then they were asked, imagine that was one flip up there, one there, and then the teams, they went to each other and they provided feedback. So these guys, maybe they told them, come on, you need to really phrase them as questions. The task is formulate questions that you will use. It's not just brainstorming, so you are at a low level. But these guys, they might have seen here, oh, haven't actually asked anything about alcohol. Do we need to ask anything about alcohol? Is it important in that kind of screening process, in the Socrates screening process and so on? And all these kind of questions. Then the professor gave them a set of questions that they will be used formally in that process. For example, in the social history, check that you have a question that addresses in the same type of way this type of areas. In the family history, these are 3 questions that you should have. If you don't have them, there is a problem. And then they go and they formulate the questions that they look the same, and they agree as a team what is their screening questionnaire. So at the end, they all come to one specific outcome. That's very important for TBL. Yeah, it's not variations. And after that, they normally gives them, let me see if this is going to work. They have the instrument developed. And then...
I'll give you a fake name. How about Oakland?
Okay, Oakland.
I'm going to call you Oakland. Tell us your story, Oakland. By the way, you don't mind if we videotape you for 100 million YouTube fans?
Oh, I don't care at all. I have YouTube videos.
Okay. Tell us your story. You're such a nice person.
Well, I caught my injury. I was at home doing laundry, and my husband, he's like previously broke the dryer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like our second dryer we're on. I was, upset. So I went, wanted a glass of wine, and I went to look for my corkscrew. Could not find it. Okay, so I went to open my bottle of wine. I used a knife and a hammer.
A knife and a hammer.
Yeah, I wanted the glass real bad.
Okay, and then what happened?
And then so I went to drill into the corkscrew, and I did the second hit.
Yeah.
It
basically,
busted.
You tried to use a hammer and a knife to shove.
That they will have to go and do using the questionnaire. They will be able to get enough information from that 14 minutes of a bit of low-level kind of interview in order then to formulate and play back. Okay, so this is what he wanted the students to be able to do. So now our question is, what type of questions will we use in an IRAT and a TRAT to help students prepare for formulating questions? So that will be the challenge for you. Everybody, you have wonderful ideas what the scenarios are. That's across the sector. We're all professionals who can come up with very clever TBL scenarios, one way or another. Am I right? But then you need to consider what questions shall I ask them that it would challenge them enough or it would correct misconceptions. Am I on? Yes, great. In order to be able to do it. Okay, let's go back to the back to the PowerPoint. So, the first question that actually asked them in the IRAT and the TRAT was this. Regarding obtaining a medical history, which statement is correct? I gave you already the incorrect, so we know, but imagine without the correct or the incorrect. So establishing a rapport is an important part of every medical consultation. Identifying the patient's perspective takes place during the gathering information phase of the consultation. An open to closed question style is an important process skill. personal and social circumstances can have a big impact on simply minor presentations. Okay? It is about the obtaining. It's not about what is the value of. It is very precise question that most of the students get wrong, because they will actually say, obviously, establishing support is an important part. But in terms of the obtaining, the most important thing here is the open to closed questions. Keeping in mind that what she wants them to do later on is to formulate questions. So it's a question about questions. So very carefully crafted. Everything is potentially a correct answer, but for the context of the seminar, which was about formulating questions, this is the correct statement. You will see the fine line. There's nothing obvious wrong here. So easily you will have a TRAT, and with you now try to defend what do you believe is correct. I can imagine everybody will give a different answer. Then it becomes a bit more specific. Which of the following statements regarding wounds is incorrect? And then gives a number of things. That goes more around the terminology that you want to test. Then goes a bit to a kind of mini scenario question within an IRAT or a TRAT, okay? This is all about the correct anatomical description. Keep in mind that the second learning outcome is you have to describe accurately, using accurate anatomical terminology, what is this? This is correct, but it's not the correct way of describing it. That will be described to a non-professional audience. But that's how you should be writing this into the medical history type of thing. The mnemonic Socrates summarizes questions that should be asked about symptoms. The A in the mnemonic stands for, and then gives you this. All of these are processes of the Socrates approach, but correct for the point of view of what type of questions is about alleviating factors. Another question, which is incorrect? So the correct, incorrect answer is A. Actually, I think it's around 50% of people that they use natural remedies, at least in the Australian context, as we know. It's not that aspirin and the rest, they cannot cause this, but it's an irrelevant fact in relation to that particular question. Yeah. So a student might say, "Oh, this is correct. I mean, that's a fact. It can happen." But we're talking about the natural remedies and the on-the-counter medications. It's not about the cause or the issue. Question 6. It's about depression. Anxiety, a common and important diagnosis to consider as they can greatly impact on the person, which, sorry, of the following, I copied right, about the depression and anxiety is correct. Yeah, now there's some triggers here, like, oh, it is about questions, maybe it's about the question. You can easily fall, a lot actually of the students, they fall into category D, but then you need to say, how are things at home? Is that a formulated question? Normally they will know from the preview that they've done in the reading, you cannot really have such an informal conversation. So although you need to ask, what is the condition at home, things, but you aren't going to phrase it like that. But a lot of the students, they opt for this question because, okay, it's about anxiety, it's about, you can have the depression. And then he had a very random question. No doctor, however good, is able to know everything there is to know about the medicine, the ability to cope, not always knowing, and so on. The question is completely random and unrelated. He just asked them to complete the sentence. I have never seen, okay, using the Google search. Now, they perform this into the TRAT, and actually when they put what are the 9 most common words when you complete this sentence in Google, yeah, there was like by very little ones, it was Star Wars, spade, and so on, but spade became first. Now, he put it there as a question for them to be able to, as a distractor question, just to get away, having also the ability to respond to a question about how would you perform a search on Google if you don't know the answer of something. But he made it clear it's not going to be relevant to your to the TRAT. But he just felt he always had one question that it was promoting a skill like search or do that it was not relevant. I'm not suggesting it's not in the methodology, but he did it quite a few times, and so on. Any comments on that? Can you see how the RAT has been formulated and why it's been formulated? There's no factual meaning question that it is a straightforward correct answer because the book says this is the answer. All of them, in the theory they read, they will be mentioned in some way, but he positions the whole of the RAT in the context of questions and formulation of questions. Go on. Yes.
When did you say again yesterday? When do you choose the content? Is it or yeah after?
To be honest, the methodology content after you know what you are aiming for and what you have formulated. Most of us, though, reality is that we will start TBL having the history of the content already. So I'm not gonna just pretend and say put your content aside and start creating it from scratch. But now that so obviously he had content already that had this type of question somehow addressed. So, but he will not put all the content online. So if I just go to see how the whole of the scenario looks like, am I connected? Yes, I am, which is good.
Because while you're searching, I just want to know, how do you give the students the content? Do you just ask them, go and read this? Or what's the type of guidance?
Okay. Our unit is equal to your module, by the way, yeah? So that's what I'm talking about here. Permanent teams. You can see here there's a TBL lead board. Every week, the teams that they come first and they reply to the best questions, they have the biggest score. They get, yeah, that's the team name, whatever names they decide to give them. 50 Shades of Grey Matter. Up next, All-Stars, Team A, the Rolling Sydney Stones, Bernard's Champions, whatever, about the TBL. You will see how prepare TBL student guide, all the informations are there. So this is part of the human body. So that TBL activity contributes to the concepts of the human body, like the introduction to human body. So there will be content in the form of, I'm going to try to open this. So there's here an online course that they will click. So this is preparation. That's preparation. On average, they had 3 to 4 hours preparation. They wouldn't come to a colloquium until they spent 3 to 4 hours completing fully online models and activities. No, I don't want to when I left. I want to see whether that will play. I'm just going with the display here is a bit problematic, guys. I think that's here. Okay, so they will have to study the things. There will be, I think, a next. A bit of a connection to the scenario that they will be doing later in the FAT. Yeah? They pre-studied, but from a totally different context. So that is a video we created. The other on YouTube was free available, and she just did it. Okay, so there was clinical practice masterclass notes to do. There was readings. They can download everything plugged in a sequence. how, it's not like here is 20 readings, go and read. You need to know that guide and you need to know that clinical examination. It's important because you already tell them that you need roughly 3 hours to complete. If you put their materials for 20 hours, they're not going to do the job. Okay? So, all of these things, if they've done their work, they should be quite clear about what are the different scenarios. They already can practice writing questions. They don't know what the FAT application is. But in that case, if you've done your preparation, you are well ahead of the game. And then, in preparation with FAT, you bring your questions. If you want, you can play. Okay, that's one thing. So, then there is the IRAT, and the IRAT talks about the different descriptions and the anatomical. If they've done the basics, they should be able to complete that. So, tests a number of concepts that they are in the readings, and they should be able to do it. Okay? That's an exercise, and so on.
Is this just an exercise, or is this the IRAT already?
No, this is exercise. That's a preparation. Yes, yeah. But obviously, if you've done it, you are ahead of the game. Then they had other weekly resources. Okay, the lecture and practical resources, anatomical medical terminology. We know that this is one of the outcomes. They can go here, they can click. Time to complete 30 minutes. They need to practice a minimum of 30 minutes on that. So I'm giving you examples of don't get. We have other ones that I show you that they are more, here is the readings, but this guy, he just created really mini modules that they plug there, and they have their own objectives. So the objective of the FAT is already an objective of an independent activity, and then comes together.
Panos, if I can just say, the module I taught this semester, it was the textbook was almost like the only reading they have, or the thing that, because it was first year students as well, and then the PowerPoint slides of the lecturer was also uploaded. And then on the Fundi side, they would say, in preparation for your class, read study unit 1, but it wasn't tested or anything. And from this, I just see that there is a gap in between, like, why would they prepare if there's really nothing in it for them? So this is still directed. The preparation is directed. It's not just saying something. So I haven't thought about the preparation in a way that you can actually give them little exercises as part of preparation for class. It's not just only reading.
That goes directly to the point. Preparation is sequence. You consider it in the context of the unit itself or the module. You might have millions of other things, but for the purposes of the TBL, and that's why you have to be careful whether it's going to be TBL throughout. If it's TBL every week, then pretty much the content that you have there should be the content you need for the TBL. And the rest you just pack it as additional information that you don't, and you do not have an exam later on that goes beyond the TBL concepts. But if the TBL is there just to, in that case, the clinical colloquium, just to support one aspect of your module, which is the clinical understanding, the reasoning, something, then of course you can have other content and other information that you assess through essays, through exams. But for the TBL section, the students, they know that the whole thing is 3 hours preparation, 1 hour in the class, 1 hour online. That's 5 hours of my time, and I'm done. And then the other, we said about 80 hours yesterday, or 100 hours, you can add other things. So it's very important that you do have a sequence of resources that they blend with each other. Going back a bit to another, any questions here? Okay, I'm just going to close this. That's an example from a humanities subject. Yeah, another TBL, big TBL group that we have. That's from history. History 1, year 1 students. They do a big history module. Big history is around the Big Bang, evolution, try to understand. So does cover historical, biological, physical, philosophical concepts all together. And then the students, they go through a series of TBL, also fully online. They never, ever, ever come in the class. Yeah, and we're talking around 300 students across Australia that they will take that class. And they will do TBL. So in that case, that's one of the activities, I think week 2 of the TBL, if I'm right, that they say on successful completion of this TBL activity, students should be able to formulate, again, reasoning and formulation is an important thing of the TBL, an initial Big Bang thesis statement. Use scientific evidence to defend a thesis statement. Use peer feedback to revise their thesis statement. So 3 things we want. Read theory of evolution about the different Homo sapiens, Homo habilis, whatever they are, try to understand. Formulate something and being able to defend it using resources that I give you for the TBL. And then and that is in particular well formed for the online space, use the online discussion forum and different things to also influence each other. What type of question would you expect here?
Application.
Yes, what type of application? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I mean, sorry, yes.
You can maybe provide a thesis or a statement, and then they must say if they agree or disagree, and then they must give proof why, and then they can debate.
Right. So, specific choice as the theory says with this scenario, or you can do a bit more open like the previous scenario. In that case, the academic, I think, end up actually having a big quiz question, but it's open enough, but very specific. So they were given this scenario. Considering all the information provided in your weekly readings and videos, work in your TBL group and provide a response to the question, what is the most important turning point in human evolution? Open. But in the different theories, the resources, they were totally controversial, meaning that every theory, whatever angle you take it, from a biological or the philosophical, they will give different responses with very good arguments. So it will create a lot of controversial discussion. Is the most important turning point of the human evolution the eccentrification of humans, so that we became a lot 90,000 years ago? Was it the fact actually that we evolved, not the fact that we became more, but the fact that we evolved as a species from the Homo sapiens? Is the most important thing actually that we got a tool to do that, the fire, the advent of fire, or is the symbolic language which is unique to human beings? Now, if you read the theories that they provided, because Big Bang theory from the big history covers everything, different theories they're going to defend. All of them are possibilities. All of them are correct. But some of them could be more correct depending on what evidence and how do you bring your statement. What rationale and what evidence will you bring to do it. Okay? So I'm pointing to this to understand how we write these activities. It's not 3 totally relevant things that you can, within a second, you can say, nah, there's no way. And there's the one that stands out. If you look at them and say, let me know. I really need to study 3 hours or 4 hours to be able to respond to that. So a typical question was like that. This is the rat. How were the first modern humans different from any other species? They use symbolic thought. Automatically, some of the questions, they bring the argument around that we are unique human beings. It's our brain and the development of language. it doesn't call language, it talks about symbolic thought. They need to start making the connections. Another type of questions, members of which group were the first to use language? That was, I recall, that was also a big appeal. Because all of them, they used something like a language, but it does not say symbolic language, proto, like the theory talks about proto-language. Proto-language will be in the Australopithecus. But it was not, from a linguistic point of view, it was not a formulated language. Homo habilis will also use a proto-language, but language in the same of symbolic, it was only after the Homo sapiens. So people, they got all over the place, and then they appealed, you need to make the language specific, it's a different thing. That's fair enough, and they end up in a very good discussion online in that kind of space. Okay? So that's where we are with the type of thinking we need to have when we go to design TBL. Where are we with time? 10 past 10? Okay. We could do a bit of 10 minutes more, a bit of theoretical. Then we break for a coffee, and then we come back and we will try to develop a sequence of outcomes, application, and a couple of questions in a group. But if we start it now, we will interrupt it. So let me, first of all, take any questions at this stage that they are still burning in your heads. Either from you or online. There's something?
So I'm with the fourth year students. So with Bloom's, it has to be something to create or compile. So it is more open. It's difficult to get it specific when you have your questions for the fourth years.
I think it has to be specific. Although there might be a level of, so there can still be questions of the type that we've seen here. So there will be like mini scenarios, but there has to be specific choice. When it comes to the FAT, the application, I will go for that level. I will go with something more like that there is still openness, but at some point you would like them to have a common understanding towards the scenario. That's why I'm saying if it ends up being 2 scenarios or 3 scenarios, so you have 1, 2, 3 FATs, it's better to have them separate than to bring them together and have a big, vague problem. Because the big, vague problem is not going to work for TBL. Unless you have extensive IRATs and that's the problem. The biggest the FAT, the more time you need for IRATs and TRATs. So if we claim that you need to complete this in a sequence of 50 minutes, the IRATs and the TRATs and the clarification, we are talking about 10 questions, 12 questions max. Can you have enough conceptual testing of the things for the scenario? So something like that, I think, will be the ideal for you. And this, keep in mind, these are medical students in the MD. So they already have a first degree. So they completed something, a biology degree or a humanities degree, and they are now doing the Doctor of Medicine. So their scenario, if we talk about Bloom's taxonomy and all this kind of stuff, all the scenarios, they move from middle to high. Whereas the guys in the other scenario here, these are 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, from every possible discipline across the university. The big history is a foundational unit. We get them from health people, biology, philosophy, everybody gets it. So it is more true, right, it's one correct. Make sense? So think of it, how can I make an open problem to have a choice? So to have a choice that they can formulate together. And that we can practice that.
Just want to suggest something in such a module where the fourth year students actually have to create something for a summative portfolio, for a summative exam or something, an open book might work, where they still need to create something for you in the exam, or you give them a scenario but with open book, because how will you assess an exam that they created something? Or in terms of even with this whole process of TBL, like three things that they have to, 3 applications that they have to go through, can actually also be something that they have created, so that you can also test it with the type of activities, like for instance a video that they have to create, or a scenario that they have to play out to create something. But I mean, also think about the exam itself. Should it be a closed book exam?
Right. There needs to have an exam. That's part of the policy in the university, yeah? So that will be one thing. Is the TBL, do you use the TBL that then contributes this scenario? And then in a way you use the TBLs to practice for that, but keep in mind TBL is about teams. So the beauty of doing that, as opposed to have just fully self-regulated online quizzes that students they do, is then they can be able to do the additional things that you won't assess necessarily in the exam. It's an important. You have a question?
For my exams, I used case studies, and then also multiple choice on the case studies, and then also to do like a quality improvement on a case study in writing, so the whole quality improvement and the outcome of that. And then also for the financial, they have to do evaluation of the income statement, balance statement, and then answer on those, the application, what they will do, and the action plans that they will take.
Yes. Yeah. Is embedded into the TBL. It's the between processes, the steps of the discussion that makes it something different. So that this particular scenario used to be a case-based scenario. So traditionally, the students that will come in the class with no true expectation to be checked about their conceptual understanding. Like, here's your resources online, you study them, you come in the class, and I'll throw you directly into that scenario, and then openly in your groups, you're gonna formulate the questions. He realized that half of the students, A, they might not turn up for this scenario, B, they might turn up and they don't even know what anatomical terminology means, and they will never do the job. So he said, I'm doing TBL, because in TBL, I will know from the first 5 minutes if I have a team, a group, to actually do a scenario, and you're not wasting my time. And the students feel responsible. Actually, when and I'll show you the results from our research, 3 times more effort in studying with no complaining about this being an additional thing on their side. Actually, they were very happy that for the first time they had a structure to follow for something in the past. What can I study? They said, you put there 20 resources. I don't have a focus to study them. Why I'm studying them?
Prof. Panos, I just want to make something, or just clarify something for my own purpose. Do I understand you correctly? Yesterday we discussed the FATs with regard to a significant problem, same problem, and then the specific choice. In this case, the FAT is being used as a case-based. So there's no specific choice. Am I understanding it correct in this? So because they write their questions, then they compare that, then they amend it to the medical history, they check and they apply the questions to the scenario. So there's no specific A, B, C or D option and then the group discussion or the clarification again. So it can be that your focused application task can be a case study and then your questions based on the case study. So it doesn't have to be a specific choice, or what am I missing?
Oh, I'm all right. All right now? online? Check. Check. Good. Check. But you have to contribute as well online, yeah, because I'm talking and people are not going there. So in the past, the activity was a total open case. The students, they can formulate any type of questions that they wanted in any kind of sequence. So there was no exemplar kind of choice there. And then they would just practice with the scenario. What he started doing with the TBL is check your questions again, a set of questions. So he added that step, which was like, now, when we finish the case, before we apply it to the video, everybody, they need to have one agreed set of questions. So between that, there will be 4 different choices. So the choices, they were generated as part of the FAT, but then they have to make a discussion which of these choices is the one we're going to be using. Another way to run this scenario, if you're going to be more close to the TBL theory, it will be that instead of having it open, you had a series of, that's the scenario, and like in step 1, we will ask, let's say, family history questions. Which of the 3 are not, which one is the less correct question? So you could actually put this in a quiz, and ask the student to say, if you had to ask, have you had similar incidents in the past? Do you have any allergies? Do you have any disease? Which one would you put first and why? You can drive this by creating the FAT with specific choice. In that case, what it asks them to do is, you create your set of questions, then I give you a set of choices, we formulate the choices together, but at the end of the day, it's going to be one specific instrument. Make sense?
For the whole group or per group?
For everybody. Everybody. That's why he did that. You go to each other, check, this question is not right, this question is not clear, this question is okay. All together now, if we were as a group to say that's the instrument we're going to be using from now on to take medical history, which one is it? You had possibly 4 choices, depending how many groups there were. Which one is the one that we go for, based on the exemplars? So that was his attempt to make it more specific. Yeah? Well, I would personally, if I was following this methodology, I would personally I will give them a number of multiple choice scenarios for them to, so for each of the areas, the personal history, the social history, I will give them questions to rate them based on what is the most appropriate, which one would you start. So actually they will have specific choice and then generate them. But I think because he had the scenarios already up, he modified them to make them as close to the specific choice as he could. Now, and this has now become, is it truly TBL? And you want to say, yeah, it was TBL until we reached that point. Now we start a bit of, is that a problem? Not really. The only thing is, okay, this is not 100% TBL. Sorry.
My question is also along those lines, because in the health sciences, at some point you need to assess skills. For example, a procedure that they need to follow, like with us, it would be, for example, the nutrition care process, or maybe taking your skin fold measurements or whatever. So you need to assess a skill, and obviously that would be at an individual level. Each student would have to demonstrate that they can perform certain tasks. So is it still within TBL, or is it where you take a little bit of an open?
If you're going to be a director of the voice, like a top director of the person, you can use the IRAT and the TRAT thinking, so you can actually have students practicing these questions or the skills through a video, but it's not TBL. I would say for this one, we just go and do, like a self-regulated type of activity. TBL is if the skill you want to practice and do, it's not a team skill, it's not about influencing, collaboration, arguing, it's not TBL. It can be case-based, it can be practice, but it's not TBL. TBL is when you have enough ambiguity and enough things in the scenario like this that you go, you check, you argue, you influence, and you move it. She could remove that part and ask students to see the video of the patient and have an online form and take the medical history as an independent. That's not TBL. Here is TBL because of this additional aspect. Sorry. This.
That we have in a third year, it takes everything together, and then the whole idea is apply, and students really struggle with it. So I think this might help them. But the problem is they still need to write an individual exam at the end. Okay. So how are we preparing them for the individual exam? Should we follow this? Because I'm sure they'll learn a lot, but they're not necessarily getting the opportunity to formulate it themselves, because that's what they need for the exam. They're going to write an individual application-based exam. So would you still say that, I mean, shouldn't there be alignment somehow? How is this one's exam?
If the output of that is a collectively, yes, good. If the output of this exam, of the FAT, is a model answer that then you have to do individual, the fact that you've been through the process of arguing, studying, and so on, all the evidence you have from the literature is that it's 100% beneficial to do that. But if then you practice them to do this particular reasoning, to have doubts, to influence, and so on, and then you simply go and do just the IRAT in the exam, like only an independent quiz, then I would say this is an add-on. If you do it, is a benefit, but the student will say, why I bother? So in that case, both of the cases, in the Big Bang Theory, the guys, they do 3 essays. All the essays are thesis statements. They have to define 3 thesis statements about Big Bang Theory from 3 different schools of thought. So they're doing what they do in the TRATs and the collaboration. They are practicing their argumentation. Then they have to do it individually. They need to form one. But if the essay was, you know, do an annotated bibliography on Big Bang Theory, yeah, that will be totally useless. And I will say, in that case, don't even bother with TBL. Because it consumes 50 or 60% of their time, yeah? 3 hours plus 1 or 2, like 5 hours a week, roughly, for TBL over 10 weeks. And you tell me it's 80 hours and the 50 hours are TBL, you better have a reason. That's why it's very important when we do that, to do it. But the benefit from TBL is on the team collaboration. I'm emphasizing that. If you don't care about developing the skill of collaboration, like a pharmacist working with a nutrition and working with a nurse or whatever in the team, there's a million of other effective methodologies, yeah? Don't get me wrong. Case-based learning, individual problem-based learning are still great ways of doing teaching. Or you just do TBL twice in the whole of the 13 weeks. The 2 most controversial weeks are the ones that they really need to come as a team and collaborate. And I've seen this example working as well. So it's individual, 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 and then TBL, that they come together. And in that case, you can do your scenario, which is you have your teams, the nutritionists compared with the other in a separate group, and they do all the things week 1, 2, 3, 4, but then week 5, they come together and they do an interdisciplinary scenario. So you just do TBL twice in 12 weeks, which is fine. The methodology does not say you have to have 12 weeks of TBL. It could be just 1 week of TBL could be good, if you believe in what it has to offer. Okay, let's have a little break, and we'll come back and do an application, and then see some results. All right, thank you guys. And online, we are back in 20 minutes. Yeah, 20 minutes, we'll be okay. Thank you.
hulle gaan ons nou nie doen. Okay? So dan gaan ons assessment en feedback gaan ons doen.
Jy vra ook is daar volledige assesseringsplan?
Ja, nee, ons vra dit op. Ja. Dan gaan ons teaching strategies en contact learning. Ons gaan eers contact learning opportunities of connected tutorials by pre-sessions, group sessions, online learning opportunities, and training and beyond. Yes. So ons wat ons baie methods relevant to participant inquiry based learning, mastery learning, experiential learning, team-based learning.
You can switch on over.
I can't problem-based learning, so I can sit on. So let me see what we ag jy het soms sekere goedes te kan doen, so jy is as jy ingenieurs wees en dan gaan jy 'n volgende ding doen, dan gaan jy volgende ding. So dan wat ons learning activities in, or formulate with explicit instruction how to participate, when responses or submissions are explored, and how to activities are assessed. So daar's goed oor learning activities in, include the use of tools to complete online activities independently, en dan is daar instructional materials, 'n bietjie oor hoe jy instructional materials gaan maak, or about to manageable and logical sequence and facilitate learning flow.
So jy gaan ander daar vra wat jy leer in jou antwoord.
Like offers access to a variety of engaging resources that facilitate communication and collaboration, relevant content to support learning and engagement. Dan gaan kyk ons na engagement. Is daar classroom discussions to develop students' reasoning skills? Is there announcements to convey urgent information and a sense of care that advanced student learning? Is there synchronous and asynchronous? Is there early stage expectations from time and regular feedback from next
Coffee, please. With milk, strong, 3 sugars.
Is daar bijvoorbeeld resources and activities including the role of sense class community? Hoe gaan
Yes.
En dan is daar module design and layout. Is daar logical, consistent, uncluttered layout is established. The module is easy to navigate. Maar ek het nou net 'n bietjie vir hulle 'n klompie goed mekaar gesit. So hulle kan van daai uithaal in hierdie in dis dit wat so in.
Ja.
Hulle gaan nie weet is daar hulle gaan nie weet is daar large blocks of information are divided into manageable sections with ample white space in between blocks. There's enough contrast between. So hulle kan daai ding kan
is onder layout.
Hulle kan dit
Navigation layout.
Hulle kan visual vertical. Hulle kan dit in daai goedjies inbou. Jy sê ja, dit is 'n qualifier. Want hulle gaan nie weet.
Ja, dit is amper al daai precondition. Ja,
so dis die qualifier. Maar hulle kan nie weet hoe dis white space.
Nee,
so dis hoekom ek dit daarin gesit. Text formatted with titles, headings and other styles enhance readability and improve the structure of the document. Also can be the use of appropriate tools to monitor and track student activity and performance. Inclusive design module. So ek het bietjie meer goed daarin gesit.
Hulle gaan dit weer kan weer doen.
Ja, hulle kan dit gaan gebruik. Information activities logically grouped in such a way that students can reach the element within 3 clicks from the home page of the online module. So, en dan het daar classroom media and technology and tools.
So dat is eintlik baie by navigation ook daai Okay, ja, die media.
Also sê dat hulle kan weet hulle moet onderskrifte insit. Daai tipe van goeders. And use the proper tools for the correct purpose gradebook to display grades announcements to convey urgent messages and so on.
Die video's is bondig, dis nie langer as
en dan sit students clear expectations of the optional and required technology, additional costs and clear instructions on how to
links to other links na ons support
small files, web optimized graphics in which to share videos or to reduce data costs.
En dan is dit ook daai well-being,
Student success resources for the module orientation, tutoring, mentoring, SI. Contact information for the module instructor department and program.
Weet jy wat ook nog wel 'n student ek weet nie is as hulle die breakbook gehad het, is expanded access daarna.
Ja, hy is twee plekke. As twee plekke. And reference for students for appropriate student support structures within the faculty and provide within various support structures at the end of the
year. Ja, so dit link dan kan jy daar sê good, dit link na die services such as
So this is why this is what we do here. Wat ek dan en dan het ons 'n ander dokument wat ons het opgestel het wat hulle dan aan my meeste semester is natuurlik aangestel. Ons het nodig om draaiwoorde te omskryf. Ons moet omskryf
dus 2 allerlei symptome waar Frans iemand with community engagement, Frans is daar connections met die community of activiteite wat so service learning community engagement. Ja, as dit is dit daar en is goed gestruktureer of is daar ander woorde so byvoorbeeld as jy nou in service learning geef is dit seker intended. Ek dink jy kyk of dit wil insit. Nee, ek stem saam. Ek dink die ons moet partykeer rapporteer of hoe is die community wat die modules het die community impact en as jy die data kan hê. Ja. Is dit nou goed? Is dit nou ja, ek weet of is dit ding wat hulle alles ja.
Thank you.
See, that's when you want to start bragging. A small broken one.
Yeah, it's not going on.
Why not?
I don't know. I thought that charger wasn't charging, but yeah, I don't know.
Why do you say we can't use the other tablet?
What other tablet, Nadine?
Smaller one.
How many tablets are
Because
there?
that side it works, we don't have 4. Oh,
Yeah.
we already have 4. Come on.
It's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh well, but that one you can just move when you get this call.
Move where?
You move that one just a little bit so that, because it's capturing the whiteboard, but it's cutting her out.
Oh yeah, I can do that. That I can do. Then if I do that, there's no need for us to charge that one. We can just make sure that one is charged.
Move that one.
Move. Move.
What should I move?
Fine, colleagues, we are back, I hope, which is great. So we'll spend now the remaining of the morning trying to do one activity. We don't need to go to the detail of every IRAT and TRAT, but I will give an example. So each of you, you have in front of you just a paper from Flipchart. I will say better try to do it in groups, yeah, and agree to one scenario either from whatever area you want. If you already brought from I ask you to bring at least like a particular case where you think could be worked. So if you do have learning outcomes already and you want to use them, or you can formulate your new ones. But we're going to try to do the backward design, which is very much learning outcomes, FAT, and then example of rats. So I would like in each of your group, 2 people, how many you want to work together, have a firm, so we try for 1 week. So it's 1 week of TBL equivalent. Yeah, I don't want to see the complete 13 weeks. 1 week, 1 theme, 1 topic, what you want to apply TBL. Write down maximum 2 learning outcomes using, and you do have a copy of the guide. Thank you. Yes, that's great. So some of you have already. Okay. So the guide is nothing more than a Bloom's revision, straightforward, but some of the questions, in particular in pages 3 and 4, so pages 3 and 4 of that guide, gives you some ways of thinking about how to write questions. That will be very important when we are talking about the rats, the third part. So the first thing you do, you have an online people, you can do that either in the chat, or if you want, open up a Word document on the side of your stream window and just type a couple of things and then copy and paste them into the chat. But I would like to get at least one of the online people to type their answers so we can get them back to you, if not more. So 2 learning outcomes, 1 application, as much as you can write at this stage, 1 FAT application, where you would like to see being the outcome of the TBL, and then try to write at least 1 question per different level of Bloom's. So write 1 very basic conceptual understanding question, 1 that's a more evaluative question, and 1 that is more about kind of synthesis. In the same way that when I show you here from the clinical scenario, there might be a question about, here is a statement, what is the statement? Or it could be something a bit more advanced. The reason we're doing that is to see if we understand the connection between outcomes, FAT, and rats. Yeah? And then what you come up, we're going to share to each other, and we're going to try to see whether what you have in your mind is a good scenario for TBL, or needs a bit of work to become a TBL scenario. All right? So the easiest way to be is actually divide your flip chart, and maybe you can use, if you want, you can also go to another table to have a bit of space. Divide it into 3 sections and move up. Okay? Online people, again, if you want to do it on the chat, have learning outcomes, write them, FAT, write it, and a couple of questions. If you're going to do it on Word, do it on Word and then copy and paste it. And we'll come back to you. So I will close my microphone now so it does not have intervention. And we will spend around half an hour going through that process.